much, Sandra. It's fantastic. It's fantastic to be back here today. This session's focus is on securing innovation whilst balancing regulation and rights, and we have no better panel and group of women to discuss this with us here today. We have an African expert in regulation and tech transformation. We have a representative of US global tech. We have an international lawyer and peace negotiator. And here in Tallinn, of course, we have Liisa Pakosta, the Estonian Digital and Justice Minister. Liisa, can I ask you to set the stage for us, please, in this balancing act of innovation, regulation, and rights?
Thank you so much. You know, Estonia is a small country, not very many natural resources, so our main resource is our people. And if we look for the innovation, it's essential for Estonia. So all the legal grounds for the innovation are designed in the way that it really enables the innovation itself. So let me just give you one example. Estonia is the leading country in the world of startups and unicorns per capita. And if we take, for example, a small city south from Tallinn, Tartu, a university town from 1632. And in this small city, there is a collaboration unit called the Tartu Science Park. And the Tartu Science Park in this small city has enabled 31 space-oriented startups because of the cooperation and collaboration between the public sector, the private sector, and the academia. This is the topping number of startups to the space area from a single city. And how have we enabled this? So first, the mindset of openness to cooperation with public sector and private sector and academia. It's not so usual around the world that the public sector is enabling such a cooperation. The second thing is that we are also open to all our mistakes to be shown. So that builds trust. The legal base, but not only, ensures that if something goes wrong, it is open to everybody, and you can trust that it is really open to everybody. So this mindset part, being open, being strategically open, and being strategically open for cooperation is the mindset that I truly believe, and my predecessors have believed, and I am absolutely sure the next political governments will believe, is something that ensures innovation in a real life.
Thank you, Liisa. So the mindset, but also then the trust, as you mentioned, all of these things are critical for innovation. Tatu, there is the example you've given. But it's very, very hard today in the geopolitical context that we have, this balance of usability and security. Mercy, can I come to you and get your perspective? We've heard from the Minister, the Estonian perspective, your perspective on what are the greatest challenges to actually transformation and innovation in the context, the geopolitical context today?
Thank you very much for that. It's really a pleasure to be part of this panel to bring a developing country context, a context that is very much full of high expectation, where we recognize the power of digital and the power of technology to deliver. And we have seen it at the forefront, delivering for financial services, delivering for education, delivering for health. But of course, even in that context, the issue of security also comes to the fore, because as we know, even in the physical world, security is always something to be vulnerable about. In the digital, even more so. way times over. So one of the challenges has been, how do we ensure that we foster innovation, make it responsive and agile to the very, very fast changing times, and at the same time ensure that there is respect for privacy, there is respect for the individual, there is respect for delivering development goals, and at the same time preserving the dignity of the individual. This is often a very delicate balance, one that calls for urgency and agility at the same time. Almost sounds like rocket science. But then it's the day-to-day reality that we live in. Fortunately for us, we come from a place where we have chosen to really do a deep dive and learn from others, draw inspiration from experiences of others, and hopefully learn from some of the areas where they could have done better, even as we pilot our own unique lived experience in Kenya. I may speak very much within a Kenyan context, but in a way, it also mirrors the African reality that we continue to work together within the African Union context and to work on tools and collaborative agreements that would then shape a shared future for Africa, even as we go out to meet the rest of the world.
Thank you so much for that, Mercy. Now, Agnieszka, many countries' tech stacks are running on Oracle across the US, LATAM, Africa, the EU. What are you seeing in the different approaches to regulating tech innovation and protecting citizen rights and sovereignty? What are some of the emerging trends that you're seeing out there across Europe, Africa, and your other markets?
So first, I would like to reflect on the 3 pillars that was mentioned by Prime Minister today, just putting this all in the context. So first, defense. I think that the fundamental human right is right to peace and physical safety. So I think that defense and the innovation in defense is absolutely crucial. We talk about the war in Ukraine and the importance of IT technology, innovation and AI. So I think that one of the things, and I see a lot of projects now opening to combine, of course, the military forces, but also IT innovation, cloud and AI with the innovation in military space. So I think that one of the trends we are seeing, it's not from regulatory perspective, it's rather a need, a necessity, absolute necessity to combine the field forces, the innovation in military space, and IT innovation that enables all of this, as it was mentioned by Prime Minister. Then about digital growth, public sector growth, combined with resilience. So it's interesting how we approach now differently sovereignty. It was said by Director General of Digital Europe just in the previous discussion about first sovereignty was about getting everything in the country, full control of the country, and considering IT infrastructure, data, etc. Now, in the context of geopolitics, what we see that sovereignty is not equal of being in the boundaries of the countries. So this is really the new dimension. We are very good in data privacy, at least in Europe. We've got the framework. Now the question is rather about operational resiliency in a context of threats. So it's not national anymore. It's really building the ecosystem with allies countries, within the group of countries to actually create the sovereignty thanks to the resiliency that will be brought thanks to the collaboration between the nations. So this is what I'm saying, moving more and more. We still want to be kind of protected in a boundary of allies in a different international organization because the world is uncertain, but it's really a shifting approach in sovereignty, which is rather continuum of operation and to provide to citizens and more widely to all the populations.
We've been hearing this. We've been hearing solidarity for a number of years now, but also just this morning we were hearing about solidarity, and I think it's about balancing all of those. How do we do that? Continuing on with our balancing act here, Nomi, you wear many hats. I'm going to ask you to put your negotiator hat on, okay? And thinking about innovation, regulation, rights, this triptych we're trying to find here. Yet we know that the dynamics between politicians and global tech organizations and platforms are pushing to favor economic growth. there's a security in that also, GDP. How do we keep human rights and keep that seat at the regulation discussion table when we actually see economic security driving democracy in many countries today?
So thank you very much, Kristen, for that excellent question, and thank you to the Tallinn Digital Forum for having me here. I think we're looking at a number of levels that we just need to analyze. We're in a polycentric governance of AI at the moment, which means we've got regulation at state level, some regional level, especially the EU, but we're really lacking a global governance framework that actually works and has an implementation mechanism that can hold both companies and states accountable. And what we need to move forward towards doing a risk approach, like a kind of traffic light, so where you have very serious risk, you have sanctions, you have a very serious implementation mechanism, and then you have kind of the yellow area where there's some negotiation. So in terms of negotiations, you need both formal negotiations and both back-channel negotiations. You need to involve state levels and you need to involve companies and not just the big companies. So for example, with the framework that exists today, and it's really only a framework, there is a new office for AI in the Secretary General's office in New York, and that needs funding. So everybody in the audience, that needs funding in order to work. And that is, yes, it is a direct call for funding. And it also needs funding for the global south and for middle companies and for small companies. Because if you don't bring the private sector into the debates, and we need for the first time to think of an international convention that applies not only to states but to private bodies too, and that is possible. Negotiations at all levels. You have the G20 summit coming up, you have the Paris summit coming up, you have endless summits coming up. Sidelines, perfect for small forums, big thinking.
Nomi, thank you so much for that. And you brought up a question there, which is key in all of this, which is accountability also. Liisa, you're the Minister for Justice and Digital. That's a new role since July. Estonia has chosen to combine these two ministries. How are you merging and balancing them to promote innovation and preserve the law and rights?
Yes, indeed. So we are looking for new innovations that are backed up by regulations that really enhance the innovation. And especially on the era of AI, we need to have a fresh eye on the legislation because we clearly want to live in a society where our basic rights are protected. So let me just give you an illustration. We are sitting now in a building which is one of the oldest electricity plants in Estonia. Believe me, when this was built, very many people were afraid of electricity because this was something new. But because of the regulations that were there in order to save the human lives and to make it clear what you have to follow to protect human lives and that there will not be fires, etc., the innovation really the innovation started. So this is the way of modus operandi that we are looking for now in the era of artificial intelligence. Estonia has also adapted a plan to be the government in the world that uses the most of the AI. We are not driven by fear. We are driven by belief that we truly can, with cooperation and collaboration, we truly can make the laws and offer the possibilities that guide us both on the way to that we protect our human rights, the basic rights and freedoms, and that we get the most out of the technological innovation that is out there. So the technology develops much more in a quicker way than the laws can come after that. So putting these two sides into one ministry is the way that we protect the human rights by design and that we allow the innovation ongoing by design of the government ministry.
Thank you, Lisa. And I think it's fantastic that we've actually got these emerging countries that are out there doing this and that we can then look to, and as the previous panels have said, also sort of like copy and apply. Mercy, Kenya is considered to be the leading technological and innovation hub in East Africa. You were the chairperson of the task force for the development of data protection and the privacy framework for Kenya. So let's look to Kenya, the emerging there. How are you creating a regulatory frameworks that both protect the data, the privacy, the rights of the citizens, whilst stimulating innovation?
This actually is a throwback conversation to 2017, 2018, when the conversation of developing a policy framework and legislative framework that understands, is sensitive to the citizens' rights, and uses that to push forward in the digital transformation framework. This was a very intense conversation, and while I had done so many stakeholder consultations in the past, this broke the record because we had over 10,000 responses. And what this told us is that data is very sensitive. It goes to the core of the citizen, regardless of the education level, where they may be placed. Are they in the city? Are they in the rural area? Are they in the formal setup or informal setup? They all felt they had a seat at the table. And at the time of developing that legislation, the EU GDPR was going through the formalization process. So I would be lying to say that we were not always looking to see what's happening in the EU, also because of the reality of the trade negotiations and the use of data cross-border, because Europe is a significant partner for Kenya and for Africa. So it was important to develop a framework that is sensitive and harmonized with the rest of the world. And indeed, when the EU GDPR was passed, it did not come as a surprise to see our airline, for example, publishing a whole page that they were compliant to EU GDPR, never mind that we did not have local legislation. But I think it goes to really speak to the reality of what the Prime Minister said today, that there is nothing like a local law for yourself by yourself. You're really in it to hold hands with the others, that you may come out stronger. So we came out with this framework. It has stood the test of time. We have the Office of the Data Protector, who enjoys great partnerships with several European countries and Brussels in the process of maturing our processes, that we would now get to the point of developing regulations and deepening our frameworks to granular levels, if only to push trade and also to be able to even better protect the space of the citizen today.
Okay, and now whilst I've got you, Lisa and Mercy, on stage here, given that your countries are both out there sort of at the lead of this, many of us are looking at what you're doing. What needs to change, maybe to start, to stop, to continue, to be able to create future regulations that both facilitates the innovation whilst continuing to protect our citizens' rights? Lisa.
Yeah. I think regulation is needed. We see GDPR as an enabler. Our companies could do things because there was a regulations that enables the companies to offer services so that they can be fully aware what are the needs in other countries in European Union and on our single market, and to grow based on this regulation. So yeah, we have all heard about the burden of regulations in European Union, for example. Definitely we need less regulations, but we need regulations that ground us for growth, because you need, especially in the technical fields, you need regulations that give you concrete possibilities for growth. And that is what we definitely stand for. If we do a new regulation, it has to be all the time a regulation that enables growth. And the second thing is that, again, I have to underline, do not be afraid. When I took this example from our small city in Tartu and the record number of space tech startups, it is enabled because our regulations do not stop or prohibit innovation. So you have to be very clear that you regulate for growth you regulate because you want to protect the basic rights, but at the same time you regulate for growth. You need the regulations that are there for the growth.
So Lisa, a message to all of our regulation makers and policy makers in the audience: do not be afraid. We need less regulation, but better regulation, grounded for growth. Thank you. Mercy, yourself.
Yeah, I think we actually need to have more conversations about what is the future we want, so that we begin the next phase with the end in mind, as opposed to going it on your own and discovering at the end that you overreached and you went into areas that were not necessary. How about bringing the future here, and then we begin to pave the way forward?
Fantastic. So yeah, determine what the vision is, regulate
Yes.
maybe for that, and then
then
wind
come
it
back.
backwards, rather than maybe putting the brakes on here and now. Okay, Nomi, now the EU, we're talking about regulation. The EU has the EU AI Act. The US, California is leading the way out there with its AI Transparency Act. Singapore, Japan, Australia, everyone's doing their own thing. This can present an absolute raft of challenges for businesses looking to scale internationally and ethically. How do we address the discrepancies in all of these AI acts out there when we're looking also at legality and rights?
So just on the heels of both previous speakers, I fully agree the regulation has to be for growth, and it has to be harmonized, and it's extremely fragmented at the moment, which is a huge problem. And in order to get there with the negotiation hat on, there need to be numerous contemporaneous negotiations with all countries. So, you know, we need to take it away from the big powers, and I fully agree that the end goal has to be very clear. It's like, unless the end goal is clear, we don't know, you know, where we're going, and we are in a time, you know, race, because technology is developing very, very quickly, and the dangers as well as the growth. You know, there's a question of where the carrot sticks. I go back to what I said earlier. We have to have a risk-based approach so that we actually have a way to limit the very dangerous trends in some countries, but we need to be all-inclusive. And we cannot cut out any country, and I don't need to mention any countries, because cutting out countries or corporations at the outset of negotiations is always a recipe for disaster, because they will just find ways to circumvent it, and they won't feel that the legislation is binding on them in any way because they were not part of the negotiation. So I would very much endorse an all-inclusive approach at state level, at corporate level, including Global South, South-South, including everybody with a number of working groups, and we need a new international instrument that will harmonize it all. There will be a framework, but some of it will have biting implementation mechanisms. So, for example, like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, for those who are familiar with it, it has various mechanisms. It has a committee that sits and debates and discusses, you know, but that has to be applied for the first time in international law, and in this in the globally challenging geopolitical framework, has to be applied also to the private sector. You cannot have a treaty that only applies to states, and that's where the challenge is, and you need to bring individuals from companies of all sizes, including the big ones, into the actual frameworks, and not only into the negotiations, but into the committees that are discussing these, so that they feel a certain responsibility. So all-inclusive and risk-based, and again, I stress, we need money, because this can't be done just, you know, out of the blue. So if we care about growth and equality and democracy and some sort of regulation that advances innovation and at the same time protects our principles, we need to all put our hands in it together.
Thank you for that overview, Nomi, and I do want to just pick up on one point there, which is also I mean, you've put out not exactly utopia, but something for us to aim for there, which can sometimes feel like quite a hard goal and quite a way off. But we do also need to hold that line then as such, and as you said, bring the private sector and make them responsible in this as well. We've started to see this now. Brazil, with X or Twitter, for example, France taking Durov into custody for Telegram. We're starting to see it. Now, Agnieszka, so I want to come to you, because often when we talk about sort of innovation, we talk about the technological drive first, and then human rights and citizen rights comes a little later in the train as such. From what you've seen in your experience out there, how does promoting citizens' rights and human rights actually help and drive innovation? How can we use this as a way to actually help European competitiveness, European growth? And do you have some examples of what you're seeing out there in the private sector and the public sector for us, please?
So first, I would like to just reflect what Ministry of Justice said about the partnership between private, public sector and academia. I think one of the things in the context of human rights, and actually the best thing to give the possibility to aspire to the human rights is actually to reach the right education level. So I think that one of the key things is education. That's why one thing we are doing, and it's not related to the innovation, I will come back to this question, but what I'm saying that it's so important for people to take the power somehow. It's really the level of education. That's why we have a lot of partnership with many governments and private companies and academia in many countries, in Africa, in Morocco, in other countries. We are collaborating also with Kenya. We have the partnership in Europe, in Greece, in many other countries to create the platform to educate people, not only the academia, the super scientists, but also the whole population, civil servants as well, to raise the level of awareness and actually be an actor of digital transformation. So this is the major focus to accelerate. We are doing this just to accelerate the growth, but also raise the awareness. On the innovation side, so I will mention the COVID-19 situation, right? Because, of course, one of the fundamental human rights, we say it's safety and peace, but also health. And it was mentioned in many sessions this morning, the actual situation that we faced a couple of years ago really triggered a lot of innovation in health. And we will be working, including in Africa, about vaccination, about analytics to bring the new vaccine, etc., etc. So the situation and the human rights can trigger the innovation because the necessity triggers the innovation. So for me, we see this trends, definitely health as a huge space for innovation. Then agriculture, it was mentioned also this morning, agriculture in Europe, in Africa, in many other countries, in the context of climate change, a big challenge to solve. And actually, how do we solve the challenge? It's actually bringing some technology to solve it. And then, of course, defense, as I mentioned. I mean, when we see, and unfortunately, we see that the battlefield in Ukraine, it's the source of all the innovation, including in technology. So when we try to solve, I mean, the innovation is coming with the necessity to solving all the human problems we are facing, and human rights in the center of this.
We say in English, never waste a good crisis, okay? And I think your point there is very much what I'm hearing, is that if you've got the people that are educated at all the levels, when that crisis comes, that's when you're able to be truly innovative. And effectively, we've seen the examples here in Europe with biotech, agri-tech, green tech. Now, we are going to be breaking for lunch in just a few minutes, but before we all go there, I'm going to ask our panel, what question should you, the audience, be considering and discussing whilst you're having lunch, whilst you're networking here at TDS, and when you go back, or you're working with your colleagues, how we can accelerate innovation and protect and promote human rights and regulation. So Lisa, from a government perspective, human rights and technology, what should our audience be thinking about, taking away and talking about over lunch?
I will actually add one question that I picked up from your education side. Of course, education is extremely important. 100 years ago, Estonia had 100% of literacy. Russia had 13%. We were still occupied by Russia shortly after that. So one of the questions is how we will preserve democracy, what we have to do to preserve our basic values and freedoms that we all stand for. The second question is that in the era of artificial intelligence, where if we look at the AI Act of European Union, there is going to be a regulation of cognitive understanding. So what are the levels of regulations we can accept while protecting our basic freedoms, freedom of speech, etc. And the third question is talking about regulations. What are the regulations that businesses need and the governments have to offer for your growth, for your operation? So, and the final question is inclusiveness. So what do you have to do all together in an open way to guarantee the inclusiveness of the things that we are doing? Thank you.
Lisa, thank you. Mercy, how about yourself? What would you be inviting our audience to talk and think about?
I'd like to recommend that the lunch table focuses on citizen services. A lot of countries in Europe and now more and more in Africa are now digitizing services from government to citizen. If that conversation went to ask, these are the services that government is giving us. If I close my eyes and make a wish, what are the other services that I think government should give me? That's the reverse. It's about citizen delight. Because so far in Kenya, we have defined it within the scope of what government is giving me. How about moving it to the space of what do I want from government? Because in digital, that marks a new reality. But that reality is in my hands as a citizen to shape it. So let's have that conversation on what more, what other service can government give me that I'd be willing to pay for because it's going to chart new territories for me, new possibilities, either as a citizen or even as an investor or even as a corporate entity dealing with government. What are those new spaces?
I think that's a great challenge for us all. What are our wish lists as such, rather than being reactive? What do we proactively want? Agnieszka, what would you like to hear people talking about over lunch and thinking about how?
So I think that we need to take the opportunity being in Estonia, such a kind of forward-thinking country, because what I'm saying is a lot of ideas for citizen services, for using AI. It's really plenty, I think, the number of people in the room at least. So I would rather think, what does it take to put it in place in a better pace than it is the case today? So I think it's, what are the hurdles? Why we are not there yet? What are the hurdles and how we tackle these hurdles? And I think that we can talk with a lot of representatives here, as I said, in Estonia, being a leading country in digital space, to understand how they did it, to do it so fast, to do it in such an efficient way. So for me, it's really think about embracing the pace of the innovation and actually put in action all these beautiful things and ideas we have in our mind.
That, I think, continues the theme that we heard at the very first lines on the stage this morning. We have to run twice as fast, almost. And yourself, Nomi, clearly funding, we've heard that. What else should our audience be thinking about and talking to move this forwards over lunch?
Well, I think Estonians are absolutely brilliant at what they do, but I think there's sort of a need for more communication with the outside world. So we actually cut across, like Agnieszka said, so there is actually the innovation sort of ideas of how to protect citizen rights and at the same time not limit innovation, but let it grow, is a brilliant sort of idea whilst protecting the international system of human rights. So I think we just need that merger with the Estonian brilliance on so many fronts, because there's so much that the rest of the world can learn, yet we need to, as I said, make the system really harmonious. And unless we make it harmonious, it won't work. And then really we're heading for a disaster area. And I think if we sit at lunch and figure out, okay, on what subjects, we've heard education, we've heard data protection of rights, we've heard the citizens sort of versus government. We just need to have lots of pots of lunch tables and figure out what do we want to see, so that we can really very fast, to quote the Prime Minister, run sort of double, try to catch the innovation pace and get these frameworks in, because we need to have an interim system, because the international mechanisms work very, very slowly, and we need to form groups that can actually actively work immediately. So I think we need to just stagger it, and I think starting at lunchtime today would be a fantastic idea.
Okay, well, maybe we can actually hack lunch. I'm going to throw this out there, okay? We need to go faster. We need to be inclusive. We need to be visionary. We need maybe some less regulation, but better regulation. But we need to be thinking about what that future looks like. So over lunch, maybe we can crowdsource what it is we all would love to see from our future governments and bring that together for Liisa, for Mercy, and for our other government representatives we have here today, so that we can indeed create an environment, the regulation, and the innovation that we need to bring our nations forwards, protecting our economies and also protecting our human rights. Thank you very much to you all. Wonderful conversations over lunch, everyone. Bring what your wish lists for the future back to us all. Thank you so much. Thank you.